Is Microsoft controlling the content of their users? Let's have a look. Hello and welcome to another episode of Heiser Says. Today I'd like to have a look at the case of GAB.ai, an alternative to Twitter, which was recently persuaded or forced by Microsoft to remove 2 tweets. Now, they use Azure. Now, if you're not familiar with Azure, this is from their website. It is a cloud provider. Now, I use Azure. I have it for an SQL database in the cloud that I have access to. It's cheap, it's reliable. I can have data stored across multiple locations that would just be not cost effective for a small business. So it is a fantastic service. I love it. I really do. But what's interesting is what's happened here with Azure and GAB. Now, if you're not familiar with GAB, it's an alternative to Twitter, and it kind of positioned itself as the free speech platform. And we'll have a look at this article from Engaged by David Lumb. So after Milo Yiannopoulos got banned from Twitter, he and his followers moved to GAB, a social network priding itself on free speech that has become popular with conservatives and the alt-right. But it appears that the platform's hosting provider, Microsoft Azure, isn't okay with the most extreme views appearing on GAB. Today, the tech giant gave the site 2 days, so 2 days, to pull 2 posts with anti-Semitic content, or it would stop servicing it. Now, just think about this. Azure, which is a backend by Microsoft, is telling their client how they can use their backend. And I mean, right now I'm running this on a Windows machine. I've got my Windows 10 here, and we're moving to a model where it's Windows as a service. You know, you don't actually own the license, you have a subscription to it essentially. And what happens if they decide that you have been making inappropriate comments or inappropriate posts, or your political views don't align with what they approve? I know that that's a bit extreme, but it just shows you where this corporate censorship can go. So taking Microsoft Azure, limiting access to it would take GAB down for weeks or months. They were soon deleted by the individual who made the post, far-right Senate candidate Patrick Little. Okay, now let's just have a look before we keep going. We'll have a look at, I looked up Patrick, I've never heard of him. You can just see here when you do a Google image search, look at the kind of rubbish that he puts up there. Okay, so I honestly kind of don't really think this guy's probably considered legit. He's probably a bit of a joke. That's the reason why he's on GAB. And I don't necessarily agree with anything he's said or done, considering, you know, these type of rubbish, but he still should have a right to do it. So here's what was sent to, this is the post that GAB put on their Twitter, and we'll just read through this here now. This is how I magnified it. So action required, Microsoft Azure, acceptable use policy violation. So they're saying that the use policy has been violated by one, it wasn't GAB, it was one of GAB's users. This message is to notify you that Microsoft Azure Safeguards team received a complaint of malicious activity originating from your Azure deployments. Details of the complaint and results of our initial investigation are included below. Failure to respond to this complaint within 2 business days or continued violation of the Microsoft Azure acceptable use policy may result in suspension of your deployments. Okay, so it shows you when you're dependent on these platforms, when you're using these platforms, you are slave to their requirements, their acceptable use policies. And I'm sure most of them are quite sensible, but when it can be used for political purposes, that's when it gets worrying. You're responsible for addressing complaints from third parties regarding your use of Microsoft Azure, including any use by your end users. The Microsoft Azure Services terms and other agreements can be found here. So what you have is you've got the third party making a complaint to Microsoft, and they're hitting GAB. So even if it's a unfounded complaint or a dubious complaint, this still is an avenue for people to cause you harm to your business, to attack your revenue streams. Because getting your Twitter account blocked, I mean, who really gives a shit? But attacking your Azure backend, that's serious. That scares me much more. Please take the appropriate next step to resolve this notice. Promptly take appropriate action, yada yada. So this is what they're saying, and it's apparently it was phishing URLs. Oh, sorry, phishing URLs where they're trying to steal stuff from it. Now I haven't looked at the post just in case, well, because they're gone. He's taken them down. But let's get back into the article. In the statement provided to GAB in the tweet above, Microsoft noticed that the Azure Safeguard team received a complaint of malicious activity. Yep. Phishing URLs with which GAB inquired about in its response, given that it was the post's offensive content that drew attention. Little, who was booted from the California GOP convention for his public anti-Semitic and white supremacist views, reportedly included threats to physically harm Jewish people and destroy a Holocaust memorial in his now deleted GAB messages. Okay, so, if you're threatening to harm people, that's just not kosher, mate. See what I did there? Microsoft received a complaint about specific posts on GAB that advocated ritual death by torture and the complete eradication of all Jews. Oh, yeah, bloody hell. After an internal review, we've concluded that this content incites violence, is not protected by the First Amendment, and violates Microsoft Azure's acceptable use policy, Microsoft said in a statement provided to The Hill. So, it's not protected by First Amendment rights in the States. It violates their Azure's acceptable use policy. So it shows you everything that GAB is positioning itself to be is kind of pointless because the back end is this. Is this here? Is Microsoft. So not that I'm supporting Patrick at all, or that I, if he's inciting to violence, I don't think it's appropriate. Here in Australia, we have the Anti-Discrimination Act, and you can't restrict a service for someone based on political views. But then we've also got all these hate speech laws and these 18... It's all quite frustrating, confusing, convoluted, and then you have a legal system which just causes you pain. So let's have a look at some alternatives. We'll go, okay, GAB is Microsoft's little bitch because they're on Azure, which probably most of us are. What are our alternatives? Now, this is where it gets interesting. We could have a look at, let me just transition here. We could look at alternatives. Now, there are Ethereum-based alternatives. Now, Ethereum is a cryptocurrency. If you're not familiar with it, the whole premise of this one, where Bitcoin is meant to be a currency that you spend. Ethereum is a decentralized, pretty much computer network. You can write a program, put it up onto the Ethereum network, and it'll run. And this is an example of a program that people have made. It's called Pepeth. And let's have a look here. Okay, this is an example of it. So you can see it feels very much like Twitter. It works like Twitter, but it's completely decentralized. So it's run on all the computers around the world that are mining Ethereum, that are mining the protocol. So unless, if the whole world gets blown up and we lose all the computers that are working on this, then we might be in trouble. But I think there are other problems than a knockoff of Twitter. Now, it sounds good, seems like it's great, but there's one big problem. Well, there's two really. Number one is that it's powered by the blockchain and it costs money. It costs transaction fees. So we'll jump back here and we'll have a look at, this is network transaction fees. So this is the Ethereum network transaction fees. Every time you do a transaction on the Ethereum network, say you're moving Ether from your wallet to an exchange to sell, to buy another cryptocurrency or to convert it over to US dollars, you'd have to pay a fee because the network of computers would have to process that And the people who are doing that, who are donating their time, want to get rewarded. And that's how they kind of mine ether or get gas by doing this. And it costs money. Now you can see when it was like at the end of last year, September, December, you can see, look at the price of ether, how high it went up to. $4.50 for a transaction on the Ethereum network. Bitcoin was like $90 at one stage when it went really high. And that means it costs money. So if we're using this alternative here, we have to pay to use it. And maybe it's a tiny little amount of gas, maybe even 1 cent for every tweet or every like. But that's 1 cent. And people are kind of funny about this type of thing. They don't actually see the value of it. They don't see, $10 will buy them a year's worth of use on their Twitter alternative without any risk of censorship. They'll see, oh shit, why am I paying $10 when it's free over there? I'll just go there where it's free on Twitter. So there is the big challenge with these technologies. If you want to have a look at it, I think it's invite only at the moment. You need to install MetaMask and you need to have some Ethereum. So it's not going to be as easy for people to use like Twitter, but it is an alternative there. Maybe we need to, look here, all the things that we've got. Maybe we need to get a organization that would support this and do it for free and these type of things to kind of get it going. But guys, thank you all for joining me for this episode of Heiser Says. I thought it would be interesting to just have a look at. I know I'm getting some comments of people telling me to jump on Gab and put things up there as well. I'll start doing it. I'll be honest, I'm not really a big Twitter fan. I've only ever started looking at Twitter because of Donald Trump and the US elections, because he just doesn't give a shit and he just goes nuts. And it was quite entertaining. That and Scott Adams with his periscopes. They're the two reasons why I use Twitter. So I never really thought it was that interesting. But I guess it's kind of steering the public discourse in the United States now to some degree. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just internet. Most normal people don't really care. But with all of these organizations now getting deplatformed, the Proud Boys have been deplatformed today. So anyone who's right of Marx is being deplatformed because Silicon Valley wants to control the culture of the world. We need to look at alternatives. And even Microsoft, because they took InfoWars, Alex Jones, off LinkedIn. Remember, Microsoft bought LinkedIn. He's never posted anything to LinkedIn. I post my stuff to LinkedIn. Why the hell would he take him off there? So you can see they've all just had enough of this guy, and they've gotten rid of him. So guys, once again, thank you all for joining me for this episode. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you all again next time. Bye for now.